The morning I knocked on Diane Marsh's site office door, I had my grandfather's survey maps under my arm in June, in the truck, with a thermos of hot chocolate between her knees. She was 10 years old and had her mother's habit of watching everything quietly before she said a word about it. She watched the evaporation phases the way her mother used to watch weather. Like the land was talking, and most people just hadn't learned the language yet. "You going in?" June asked. "Be 2 minutes," I told her. The Aldera Flats had been my work for 15 years. I ran maintenance on the evaporation weirs, the brine channel gates, the pump housing along the south rim. Nothing glamorous. The kind of work that got done before anyone arrived, and again after everyone left, so that the people who arrived and left never had to think about it. I drove a truck that needed a new clutch cable, and I wore the same canvas jacket, October, that I wore in March because the basin ran cold at dawn, no matter what the calendar said. That was fine by me. The county paid a modest rate and asked no complicated questions, and June rode along most mornings before school. There was no better classroom I'd ever seen than 7 square miles of salt flat turning pink in the early light, the brine channels catching the first sun like hammered copper, the far mountains still dark and solid on the rim of the world. The Marsh Energy crew had been on site for 3 weeks. A geothermal extraction project, serious money, 6 drill rigs staged along the north and east pads, a row of crew trailers on the access road. Diane Marsh ran it herself, which I respected. She was on the site by 6 every morning, and she knew every number her engineers handed her. Sharp, decisive, exactly the kind of person who builds something real. The problem wasn't her. The problem was what her engineers were measuring. I'd watched Kip Solano's crew run their digital survey from the North Access Road. Good equipment. I didn't doubt their data. I doubted what the data was looking at. A ground-penetrating radar sweep reads what's directly beneath it on the day you run it. It does not read what my grandfather spent 40 years drawing by hand. The way the brine channels migrate season to season, the clay shelf fault lines that shift with the water table, the 3 collapse zones along the central basin floor that 3 generations of my family had marked in red-hatched ink, because every 10 or 15 years, the land reminded somebody they were standing on a ceiling, not a floor. My grandfather had written in the margin of Map 7, in his careful block letters, "The flats are generous until the day they are not." He was not a man who wasted words. I rolled the tube under my arm and knocked on the office door, Kip answered. He was maybe 35, competent face, the look of a man who'd passed a lot of certifications recently. He looked at the tube under my arm the way people look at something they've already categorized. "Mr. Cutter," he said, not unfriendly. "Just finished." Diane Marsh was at the folding table behind him with a laptop and a site plan spread flat. She looked up, and I'll say this for her. She gave me her full attention. That mattered. "These are survey maps," I said. "My grandfather started them in 1961. I've kept them current. They cover the subsurface brine channels and the clay shelf fault lines across the whole basin. There are 3 collapse zones marked in red. Pad 3 is sitting on the edge of one of them." She looked at Kip. "Our GPR sweep was clean on Pad 3, he said. "Even. Professional." She looked back at me. Not dismissive, just certain. She had engineers and she trusted them, and that was a reasonable thing. A woman running a project this size had to trust the professionals she'd hired, or she'd be drowning in the opinions of every person in the county who'd ever stood near a shovel. "Thank you, Mr. Cutter," she said, genuinely. "We've done a full subsurface survey and we're confident in the data, but I do appreciate you coming in." I set the tube on the corner of her desk. "I'll leave them here in case." Kip started to say something. I was already through the door. June watched me cross the gravel back to the truck. "Well," she said. "They're covered," I told her. She looked at the site office a moment, then passed it to the basin. Her mother had sat in that same seat 10 years ago and done exactly the same thing, looked at the salt, and measured something the rest of us weren't seeing yet. "Mom used to say the flats don't care what your survey says," June told me. She did say that. Was she right? I pulled out of the lot and pointed the truck toward town. "Drink your chocolate before it's cold." She drank it. We didn't say anything else about it. 4 days. I patched 2 weir boards on the south channel, where the water table had pushed up overnight, and the lower frame. I replaced a pump seal on the east rim housing that had been weeping brine for a week. I checked the marker stakes along the central floor, twice because the water table had been high all month and the clay shelf ran soft when the brine table rose. I'd seen it before. In the wet years. June did her homework at the tailgate 3 afternoons straight while I worked, pencil moving slow and careful the way she did everything. Her boots dangling off the back gate. One afternoon she brought her friend from down the road, and they sat up on the truck bed and watched the flamingos that came in from the eastern reservoir at dusk, a slow pink line settling into the shallows, like something that had no reason to hurry. There are worse offices. I thought about my grandfather, working this basin in the years before the county road was paved, with a hand level and a notebook, and the patience of a man who understood that the land would show you what it was, if you gave it enough time. On the morning of the 4th day, I heard the drill rig on pad 3 change pitch. I know that sound. If you've worked a basin long enough, you know the difference between a drill bit finding resistance and a drill bit finding nothing. One sounds like work. The other sounds like falling. I was replacing a gate pin on the south channel weir. I stopped and listened. The rig note went hollow. That flat, open tone you never want to hear. And then the radio on my hip came alive with Kip Solano's voice going fast and tight. The ground under pad 3 had shifted. Not catastrophically, not yet. But the void was open. Clay shelf above it was sagging under the weight of a drill rig and a crew trailer, and that arithmetic had a limited amount of time left before it came to its own conclusion. I was already moving. I had my own copy of the maps in the truck. I always carried a copy, same as my father had and his father before him. I knew the load-bearing clay shelf on either side of that collapse zone because my grandfather had marked it. My father had verified it with a second probe in 1987, and I had walked it myself 6 times in 15 years. I knew where you could put weight, and where the ground was only borrowing the idea of weight from you. Kip met me at the edge of the pad. His face was the face of a man in the middle of revising something he'd been certain about. "The void is running northeast," I said. I had the copy out on the hood of his truck before he could say a word. "Your rig is here. The load-bearing shelf is here and here, 12 feet either side of the collapse zone. If you shift the rig trailer to the north marker stake and redistribute the platform weight to these 2 bearing points, you stop the shelf compression. You've got 90 minutes, maybe a little more, before the clay starts wicking moisture from the void and you lose the margin." He looked at the map. He looked at the basin. A long moment passed. "Show me," he said. We moved the rig. It took closer to 2 hours because equipment never moves as fast as the math says it should, and there were 3 separate loads to redistribute. And a crew trailer that had to come off its footings and be repositioned by hand. The shelf held. By 10 in the morning, the void was contained, the weight redistributed, and the ground under pad 3 was stable. The drill would go back in the next day with a revised bore angle that cleared the brine channel line entirely. My grandfather had marked that angle on the back of map 7 in pencil with a note that said, "Try here instead." I'd written it in 1974 and nobody had tried there until now. Diane Marsh found me at the south rim just before noon. She had the map tube from her desk in her hand. I hadn't heard her come down from the office. Didn't see her until she was standing beside me, looking out at the same basin I was looking at. "Mr. Cutter," she said. "Ma'am." We stood there a moment. The salt was white and flat and indifferent in every direction, the way it had been when my grandfather first walked it with his surveying rod, and the way it would be long after the last drill rig hauled out of here and the access road went back to gravel. "I want to apologize," she said. "No need for that," I told her. "You had a clean sweep and good engineers. That was the right call with the information you had. The information I had was incomplete." "Yes, ma'am, it happens." She held the tube out toward me. "What do you want for these?" I'd thought about the answer to that question. June had asked me the same thing at breakfast when I told her what had happened on pad 3. She'd looked up from her cereal with her mother's level eyes and said, "What are you going to ask for, Dad?" Not curious, evaluating. She already had an opinion and was waiting to see if mine matched. "I want them scanned and archived properly," I said. "High-resolution copies. One filed with the county assessor office. one attached to every future extraction or development permit issued for the Aldara Flats. As a courtesy recommendation, as a condition of the permit, Diane Marsh looked at me. So the next crew knows, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Not calculating, thinking, there's a difference. Done, she said, and done in writing before my crew breaks camp. You have my word on that. That's all I need. She nodded once. The Fae people nod when they mean it completely and don't feel the need to say anything further. Then she turned and looked back out at the basin, at the white salt and the far ranges and the old, patient silence of a place that had been here long before either of us, and would be here long after. Your grandfather mapped all of this himself. Him and my father, I said. I just kept it current. She looked at the tube in her hands for a moment, then held it back out to me. I took it and put it under my arm. Same as I had 4 mornings ago, and I walked back toward my truck. June was out of school in 2 hours. I had the north rim pump to check before I picked her up, and I wanted to drive her past the second weir board on the way home, because the flamingos had roosted there again at dusk the evening before, low in the shallows with the last light on them, and I knew she would want to see if they came back tonight. The Aldara Flats didn't care what your survey said, but they were honest about it, if you knew how to listen, and if you were willing to stand still long enough to hear.